Hey guys, Scottathan Watch Mojoton here, and today we're going to be going over the top 10 wildest bugs in Dead by Daylight. Jesus, this screen is bright. The criteria for determining wildest, it is sort of vague. It's going to be a balance between how long the bug lasted, how impactful it was, how funny it was, how good or bad it was. Basically, I just picked the 10 most notable things that I could think of, whether they were very minor in the sense they weren't, ruining games or anything like that, or they were just downright funny, or they just completely broke the game. There's not really too much of a criteria here. It's just the top 10 I can think of in terms of being notable bugs. So, not an exact science here, but none of my shitty top 10s actually are. That being said, let's go right into the very first one, which is the Spirit Ass Cam. For some reason, this has been in the game almost since Spirit came out. So this bug is very simple. Whenever you pick Spirit as killer and start the match, the camera doesn't rotate around you as normal. It just rotates around your ass. And that's it. That's the entire bug. And you would think, okay, well that's pretty funny, but that's not worthy of like a top 10. And normally you'd be right, except it's been there for like 5 years. The duration that this bug has existed, I feel like I have to include it at least in the 10 position here, because it's insane how it hasn't been fixed, so much so that a portion of me thinks that this is just intentional. I actually think this might be intentional because there's no way after 5 years they haven't fixed just the camera rotation around the killer starting. It doesn't make any sense that they have not noticed this by now, and I don't know what caused it. I just know it's been there for almost the entire time that Spirit has existed. And no one really complains about it because, ass. So it's definitely a weird one. I don't know why it's here, but it's here to stay forever, apparently. Number 9, Wesker animation bugs just in general. Now, these sort of err on the side of not really harming the game too much. They're just really funny. And even to this day, there are still a couple of animation bugs that can happen with Wesker, but there's been so many, it's hard to even count. One of my favorites is when you try to use your charge on somebody, but they dead hard or get endurance at the exact same time. They will basically be in the grabbed animation as if you are holding them, but then they'll be running away. And that pretty much doesn't reset until they do a new animation of some kind. So the chase will continue as they're in deep wound after they're dead hard, and they'll just be like Matrix sliding across the ground. It's really funny. There's also a couple of ones where you're stuck in the throne animation. There's been numerous bugs with the grabs with Wesker, and they're a lot harder to replicate now. Really, the frame perfect dead hard on kind of a high ping is like the only way to get that one now. But there have been so many different Wesker bugs, and pretty much all of them have just been really funny to see. So definitely not something that negatively impacted the game at all. Just something that you saw and you would just find hilarious. Number 8, the Insta-Kill Anniversary Event effect. So this was during the Masquerade Anniversary event. Now, during that event, there was an ability the killer could have if they powered up their event power, where they could remote hook somebody. So instead of having to pick them up, walk them to a hook, you would pick them up. You could press, I believe, Q, I forget the exact button, but you could press a button and teleport that person to the nearest hook. It was really convenient as killer. It honestly was kind of overpowered. It just lets you skip the entire hooking stage pretty much entirely because you just threw him on a hook wherever, it didn't really matter. And so that was really, really strong. But there was one specific, very weird bug that would happen under a specific set of circumstances. So the exact thing that would happen was you would pick up someone as killer, and right before you would teleport someone to a hook, they would have to be saved off of your shoulder, whether it be under a pallet and have perfectly timed pallet stun, or a flashlight save, or like a flashbang or something. If you timed this perfectly, the weirdest thing would happen. Instead of the person just getting saved and running away, the person that did the saving would instantly teleport to the hook instead. So you would have people on death hook go for a flashlight save and then just straight up instantly die when they tried. It was the funniest fucking thing I've ever seen, but really, really frustrating because you would get the most perfect save at Survivor and then just instantly die. It's one of those things, it's almost like dark humor where how do you not laugh at that? Like, even if you're pissed about losing the match, just you get in position for a save and then you just eat shit and explode. It's just, I don't know, like the absurdism there, it just elevates this bug above so many. And unfortunately, for hilarity's sake, it only lasted during the event, and I believe it was fixed pretty quickly as well. So it's not like we're going to really see that soon, and it was a pretty short lasting one, but it's the combination of how ridiculous it is, and I would say it didn't harm anybody, but it kind of did. It definitely harmed survivors a lot, but it was a very specific set of circumstances that had to happen, and it wasn't super common, but when it did happen, you just couldn't help but laugh. Next, the gen popping while players are dead bug. I don't really know how to word this bug better, but basically a very long time ago, there was an issue where if there were a certain number of players dead, more generators would pop related to how many people are dead. Basically, it was the number of dead people plus 1, I think is the correct formula for that. So in an example here, you would have 2 people dead, but 3 generators left. The people would do 1 generator, and then it would be the 2 dead plus 1, and then all 3 generators would finish. I don't know how the hell this bug came to be, but it was really rough for that entire, I feel like it was like a month before they fixed it. Because if you killed people too early, you might actually end up losing more than if you left people alive past a certain point. Like once there was 1 generator left, then you could start killing people because they couldn't go into negative generators. But if you were in that scenario where there were like 1 or 2 people dead and you had 2 or 3 gens left, it wasn't a free win anymore as killer. You actually were very likely to lose because all they had to do was 1 generator and all of them would complete. Again, I don't know what caused this. I don't know why it lasted so long. I can't even think of the exact patch that this happened on, but it was a really frustrating time to play killer because yeah, any pressure that you had, there were people that actually, I know this is sort of a meta that's happening now, but people were actually just slugging people out to deal with it. Because at least if they were slugged out on the ground, they wouldn't have to worry about the person dying until they had everyone down on the ground. Then you hook everyone at once and the game's over. So I guess that was the beta for a possible slug meta that's been trying to happen now. But yeah, it was really, really miserable as killer. And yeah, I believe it took them about a month to fix it. Again, I don't know how that happened, but the formula was basically, yeah, however many people were dead, plus 1 is the amount of generators that would get auto-completed after someone alive finished a generator. So brutal time to play killer. Really, pretty much impossible to deal with. Number 6, Merciless Storm, just in general. It's been bugged in so many different ways, but one of the bugs was by far the most detrimental to the game health. Before that, I'll talk about one of the previous bugs in which you would hit the skill checks of Merciless Storm. For those who don't know, Merciless Storm is a perk that when a generator is almost finished while you're working on it as survivor, you'll get a bunch of rapid fire skill checks. If you miss a single one of them, the generator gets blocked. So it's like a little frantic moment right at the end there. It's not very good, but on certain killers or maybe even with like Unnerving Presence or Doctor, it can be pretty useful. So that's what the perk does, but there was one bug where even if you hit the skill check perfectly, it would treat it as if you missed and the generator would get blocked anyway. So this would make your teammates make fun of you for missing a skill check, even if you did not, and then you had to deal with the generator being blocked. So it was basically free guaranteed slowdown, and that was really obnoxious. So they eventually did fix that, but then another much worse bug arose where if you missed a skill check with Merciless Storm, not only would the generator get blocked, it would regress down to almost 0. So you would go from like 90 to 10% on the generator every time this bug happened. And it wasn't a guaranteed consistent thing from what I could see. I remember as Survivor going against killers with Merciless Storm, and it didn't always happen. And when it did happen though, I mean, you basically had to do 7 or 8 generators as Survivor while this bug was happening. And it made Survivor pretty much unplayable because you can't do that many generators. It's pretty much impossible as the killer's just AFK half the match. So that was really bad, and the problem was you couldn't even punish people for abusing it because they could just simply claim ignorance. They'd just be, oh, I just like Merciless Storm, it's my favorite slowdown perk. And then you can go, oh, but you're abusing a bug. And they'll just go, I didn't know it was bugged. I don't read forums. I don't watch streams. And it's true, you can't really prove that they knowingly abuse an exploit. So unless they were like streaming and were like, haha, I'm exploiting, but no one's going to do that. So yeah, it was really annoying. No one was getting banned for it. And we had about a month straight of games that were basically unplayable as Survivor if killers were abusing this. Again, whether they were intentionally abusing it or not, doesn't really matter. It was everywhere and it was an absolute nightmare. I don't really know how you're supposed to trigger it because like I said, it was seemingly random. Sometimes it would happen and sometimes it wouldn't. But if the killer had the perk on, you were in for an extremely long, drawn out, very boring match of doing a shit ton of generators. Coming in at number 5, Wake Up. Wake Up was bugged to an extremely dangerous degree during one patch. Wake Up would increase the speed of everything instead of increasing the speed that you open exit gates. So basically, every action a survivor took was just 15% faster, and I mean every single action you would take. I'm not saying you just do gens 15% faster, you do heals 15% faster. No, you unhook 15% faster, you vault faster, you drop pallets faster, you vault pallets. Everything is faster. And 15% faster. It was basically like double old resilience, or at least almost. And all you had to do was slap on the perk. And of course, it lets you open gates faster as well. Now, without the perk being bugged, Wake Up was kind of dog shit. And even now, it's not even that great. They buffed it to a usable degree and then they nerfed it again. But back then, when it affected every action you could take, it was objectively the best perk in the entire game. So many people were running it. Again, mysterious, clueless people that had no idea it was bugged. Crazy. They're all just deciding to use Wake Up now. How about that shit? But again, I don't think it was a very heavily punished thing, if at all. I don't remember anyone getting banned for it. But Wake Up eventually, I believe, was disabled. They kill switched it, which did take a little bit of time. But there was about a week where everyone was just 15% faster on all actions, and it's like you just took Cheat Engine and set the speed multiplier to 1.15. It's just, it made killer games basically impossible. Generators went too fast, chasing people was 10 times harder. It was just every action that you took was 15% faster, and it was an absolute nightmare. So luckily they did kill switch it, and then they did change the perk, and they changed the perk again, then changed it again until the current version that we have. It did happen to be pretty useful on a PTB, but then they reverted it back to being kind of just like, eh. I get why they did that. They didn't want to incentivize sort of a rat play style where you're the last player left, and then you just open the gates with Soul Survivor and Wake Up and get out like that. But overall, I do think the perk could do with some type of buff to make it a bit more usable, but maybe not the insanely broken form that it had. Coming in at number 4, we're starting to get into some very, very insane shit. Legioned men stacking, again, was one of the things that I believe some people got punished for, but it's so hard to punish people for abusing things like this because, again, some people just simply might not know. And in truth, a lot of people did not know because there was no patch note that talked about this. It just sort of happened and people started slowly noticing this over time. But if you stacked like the Dirty Blade add-ons from Legion, if you were to hit someone in your power, normally they'll get a bleed out bar. After like 10 or 12 seconds, I forget the exact timer. It's a relatively short time. They complete the bleed out bar and they mend themselves and they're good to go. But with this combination of add-ons, for some reason, every time you put someone to mending, it would stack the previous amount. So if you hit it once, it would be 12 seconds. But then if you hit the mending again later, then it would be 24 seconds. And you could see how Legion hits people, 50 times during a match. You basically had mends that took 20 minutes to finish, so you just couldn't play the game anymore. And it made it, again, impossible to win as Survivor. Your actions, you couldn't do anything. You would just eventually bleed out, and that was it. You had a little bit of time to like work on generators or something like that, but for the most part, you could not complete the mend. And the mend bar would go away at the same rate. You just couldn't make the bar, like, if you were doing the mend action, it would pause it, but then that's all you were doing, and you would never finish it. So effectively, you were just doomed. You just couldn't do anything for the rest of the match. So again, this bug did get fixed as well, but it was somehow more miserable than the original Legion, which is the dumbest thing behavior has ever done in the game's entire history. So they somehow made something even more dumb than that, because DC penalties were in, so you couldn't just leave, and also you just had to sit there for 20 minutes mending, or just intentionally die. Just slug yourself on the ground and don't mend. Those are your only two options if you went against Legion. By far one of the most obnoxious bugs to ever exist in the game. Coming in at number 3, proof that not all of these bugs need to be extremely detrimental or game ruining. Some of them can just be really funny. And this is the infamous tale of Geralt. Geralt is an extremely cursed abomination that arose from a glitch being able to swap skins when you're not supposed to be able to swap them. I never really learned how to do this bug myself, but you could basically unlink sets and just put headpieces on bodies that you were not really able to normally do. So what you could do is just put, James Sunderland's face on Cheryl's body, and then you had Gerald. An absolute nightmare abomination. For some reason, the skin contorted and got really skinny and like Slenderman-y, but also had like the shoulders of a god, and it had like this scary ass like run cycle, and the neck did not properly connect. And there were other variants of Gerald. I'm not saying Gerald was the only one. Really, the correct name of this bug is unlinked swap glitch or something like that. It's more something like that. But I brought up Gerald because Gerald was the original eldritch horror that arose from this bug. And to this day, Gerald is seen as like one of those Cthulhu type entities that you read about in ancient scripture, and there's tales and firsthand accounts of seeing it, but no one's ever personally seen it themselves. It was an absolutely terrifying time to play Killer, because when you would see that, you would just stop in your tracks and be frozen with fear due to the threat of what Gerald could possibly do into you. You could only see Gerald if you had 50 insight, which took a lot of farming, and it was just an absolutely terrifying time to play the game, even as Survivor 2. All joking aside, Gerald was an absolutely hilarious bug, and I wish they did not fix the ability to link or unlink sets that were a part of one cosmetic set and swap them with crazy shit, because it led to so many stupid things like this that were just so fucking funny to see. So we can't have any fun. Gerald, unfortunately, did meet his end. There were a couple of similar things that arose and then kind of dropped back out very briefly, but Gerald had a very short life, but what a life it led. Number 2, it was Christmas 2016. A lot of people were not playing the game at that time. I would assume most of my viewers did not even touch the game in 2016. Most people that played way back then have moved on or in some way are not related to the game anymore. But in Christmas 2016, I've talked about this in previous videos before, there was a time when the developers were on Christmas break, so they could not fix anything. So basically, there was an entire month of the game where there was a perk swapping and a perk duplicating bug. So basically, you could have 4 of the same perks, or you could equip Survivor perks on Killer or Killer perks on Survivor. And you can imagine how incredibly broken that may be, because imagine a Killer running Bond, for example. You would just see everybody. You had permanent aura reading of the entire team. Imagine stacking 4 Unrelentings, and in fact, that's a thing a lot of people did. Back in the day, Unrelenting also had a built-in Save the Best for Last effect where it actually worked on successful attacks too. So you would stack Unrelenting and you could move faster than running by just swinging at people. And when you hit them, you had no attack cooldown, so you could hit them twice in 1 second. It was obviously insanely broken. There were a whole bunch of broken combinations, and survivors were abusing this too. You could stack 4 self-cares and heal yourself faster than the killer could even touch you. There was so many insanely broken combinations with this, between the swapping and the duplicating, that the game was an absolute chaotic shit show for that entire month. There was no dev response during that whole time. I started in 2017. I just barely missed this. I missed the cutoff by a couple of months, but I've heard tales from people before of how you weren't even playing Dead by Daylight anymore. It was basically a chaos modifier. It was like a special game mode for a month because no one was playing legit. Everyone was exploiting everything. It was really easy to do too. All you had to do was switch roles and then click your inventory kind of at the same time. And there was also an issue here around this too, where you could drop your killer power. And that was the Christmas 2016 patch was so unbelievably busted in so many ways. And we had an entire month of just, there was nothing you could do about it because the developers were on vacation. So the game wasn't even Dead by Daylight then. It was just pure chaos. So many different creative builds appeared with stacking the same perk and swapping perks. It was both a nightmare from what I've heard and also kind of fun because it was just, yeah, it's like everyone was just playing with cheats. Speaking of Christmas 2016, the final and greatest bug that Dead by Daylight has ever had, not because it was the most detrimental, not because it was the most harmful or the most notable or anything like that, it was just simply the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Some of you might have heard tales of the creature Gerald, and that's a very scary eldritch creature, but there's only one creature in Dead by Daylight's history that is scarier than Gerald, and that is the number 1 Chainsaw Myers.
I have to see this.
This was the most terrifying thing in Dead by Daylight. It was an extremely brief time in the game's history where it was truly a horror game. I don't care how many hours you had, it was utterly terrifying. Chainsaw Myers, if you were not aware, was part of a bug where you could acquire other killers' powers. Some of you might have seen clips before where killer powers have been on the ground because that's how they were coded. Basically, a Huntress Hatchet might be on the ground, you could pick up the power, and now you had Huntress Hatchet's power. I don't remember how to actually trigger this bug specifically, but basically what it involved was picking Myers and picking up Billy's chainsaw. Something about swapping roles at the last second, swapping killers. You would have the chainsaw power in your inventory and people would queue up as Michael Myers. Now, you could do this with other killers too, but people picked Myers because he had basically no tear radius in tier 1. So you had a one-shot killer with the movement speed of the chainsaw with basically no tear radius. And the best part is the model didn't render properly as well, because when you had the killer power, it tried to contort your skin to the chainsaw, and sometimes it would work and sometimes your body just wouldn't appear. So you would get this absolutely terrifying glitched floating Myers head that made no sound and had a floating chainsaw below it and also a floating butcher's knife right above it. It was the most horrifying thing. I've seen so many clips of this bug, and the thing is, you wouldn't even hear the chainsaw is the scariest part. At least with the Billy chainsaw without a tear radius, you would hear the chainsaw. But no, it was so bugged that the Myers would just walk next to you and you would just die instantly from a chainsaw that they could see on their screen. They could see the bar, but you just saw a floating head just fucking kill you and then vanish into the ether. It was the most terrifying thing in this game's history, and by far, in my opinion, the most notably hilarious thing I've ever seen. I could watch clip compilations of people getting scared by that shit all day. It is my favorite bug in the entire game's history. Again, it didn't exactly ruin the game. It was just something that was just so ridiculous that you can't just help but go, cinema. That is it. That is behavior in a nutshell right there. Floating Myers head with a glitch chainsaw, making no sound, one-shotting people. God bless. And that's it. That was my favorite bug in Dead by Daylight. There have been so many, and I could not even... There's 50 I could come up with. These are the 10 that were my favorite. I'm curious to hear what you guys have, because I'm sure you've got your own. But thank you for watching. I gotta go feed him now. Bye-bye.